Hello, welcome to the Craft House Magic Setter tutorials. My name's Ellie and today I'm going to show you how I wet block my knitted items. So I will go through actually soaking the items in wool wash, squeezing the yarn out, blocking those items, show the different techniques I use for various different items, and then I'll show you them blocked at the very end. So you can find timestamps across the bottom of the screen and also in the description bar down below if you want to find blocking techniques for a particular item. So today I've got a jumper, a shawl, a baby cardigan, a hat and a pair of socks to block. So I've got 4 bowls here ready to soak my different items, partly because some of them are larger and I want to keep some of the colours separated just in case they run. They probably shouldn't, but just in case, always better to be safe than sorry. So I've got some bowls of sort of lukewarm water so that it's nice and warm to your hands so you don't get too cold or anything, but you don't want the water to be too hot. And I'm using some Eucalan. This is a 100ml bottle, but they do a 500ml and also little samples as well if you just want to try them out. And this time I'm going to use a eucalyptus flavour. So I'm going to just pop a little splodge in each of the bowls, and give it a bit of a mix. There are various other fragrances as well. My favourites are lavender, eucalyptus and grapefruit, but they also do an unscented and jasmine as well. And I actually sell that particular Eucalan in my shop, and I'll leave links to those in the description bar down below. So right, I'm just going to pop the items carefully into the water. I will leave links to what the patterns are called for all these items and what the yarns are in the description bar down below. So I'm popping the hat and the cardigan, the baby cardigan, in the same bowl because the colours are quite similar. Got a pair of socks, and because those have got a light colour and a dark colour, I've kept those separate just in case there's any running of colours. I've got a big jumper here which you can't fit anything else in anyway. And I've got a shawl. So all the yarns that I'm blocking here are superwash yarns, so they're slightly less sensitive to felting, so we don't have to be as careful, but it's always good just to be quite gentle with it anyway because it still can felt. So I'm going to leave those for at least 20 minutes to let them soak nicely. The jumper, I've actually washed it and blocked it before and it has been worn, so I'm showing you what I'm doing with this just on a regular basis when the garment is being washed. So I'm going to leave those for at least 20 minutes to have a nice soak. So I'm now going to gently squeeze the water out of the items. So this is a pair of socks, and I've just got another bowl there so that I can pop the things that are already soaked in. With something like this jumper, you have to be careful to sort of squeeze as much as you can out at this point. Because I'm going to spin mine, I don't have to worry about squeezing as much of the water out as you would do if you're using the towel roll method. So I've just give it a bit of a squeeze there. Same with the shawl, it's a bit awkward to get out. Try and sort of get it in one piece and then squeeze different areas to remove as much water as you can. But like I said, if you are using the towel roll method to dry it for the next step or to get more water out, you might want to squeeze more water out at this stage. So now everything's all squeezed out, I'm going to take it over to my spinner. But I'll give you a quick demonstration of what to do with a towel as well. So this is my White Knight spinner that I use for getting yarn dry because I'm a yarn dyer as well, and it's really handy to dry knitted items just a little bit. It doesn't completely dry, it just spins the water out so that it hasn't got so much water to dry out afterwards. So if you haven't got one of these, I will show you how to roll the items in a towel in a minute, but this just really helps things to dry quicker. So when I'm popping things in, I'm just making sure that they're sort of on the outside of the drum. If you have something large like this jumper, I'll sort of trail it in so that you're going around in a circle, because when it's spinning, if you've got the garment sort of flat over the bottom, it sometimes can stretch out, so it's important to place it nice and neatly in there so that it doesn't do that, and also not to run it too long as well. So I've just got the shawl so it's placed around the inside of the drum. Same with the cardigan. I'll just pop the socks on the top, and mine's got a little like a safety lid thing that goes on the top of it, and I just push it down a little bit to make sure that everything's sort of loaded correctly. If you don't load it evenly, it will make a bit of a racket. So I'm just going to switch that on now, and you should be able to see the water coming out, but obviously I can't talk over it because it's a little bit noisy. They're done. I'm just going to take those out. They're still very damp, but just not soaking wet, and it just makes it easier, especially when you're trying to spread it out, that they're not too wet. So I'm just going to quickly show you with this baby cardigan what I'd do if I didn't have the spinner. I'd sort of flatten it out quite neat, and then I'd get the towel, roll it up like this, and then I'd squeeze it like this to get all the water out. And you do that various times, and you might need to get a clean towel if something is very, very soaking wet. But that just takes a lot of the moisture out. And you could do that with any item, just like I did with this spinner. It's just an alternative to having a spinner. So with something like this jumper, where I haven't actually got to block it out because it has been worn before and it doesn't really need a lot of blocking, I'll basically just straighten out the garment and leave it to dry flat, to be honest, because it doesn't need a lot of stretching out. Just want to make sure it dries nice and flat so that it's all nice and neat. And I'll normally either leave it on the blocking mats like this without being pinned out, or I'll put it on my heated towel rail that I've got in my conservatory, which is really handy. So these blocking mats, they're actually supposed to be for like the garage. They're like a foam material, and you can quite often get these for children's play areas where they tend to be smaller, but I just find these easier to use because they're nice and large. I got these, I think, from Home Bargains for about £10 a few years ago, and I think they're probably about 12 or 13 now for a set. But they're nice and cheap, as opposed to the ones you get from sort of Knit Pro, where they can be quite expensive. And you can pin things into them. So with this one, I probably wouldn't bother pinning it out properly because it has been worn, but I just wanted to show you what I do with a garment that I've already actually blocked once. I just want to make sure it dries nice and flat and neat. I just spend a bit more time titivating it so that it is nice and neat, so that it dries nicely. So I've now got a couple of smaller items to block. I've got a pair of socks, and I have actually purchased some wire sock blockers that are really handy to block socks on. You can just pop them on and they're just nice and easy to get them to dry. I prefer these ones because obviously they'll dry a little bit quicker because they're just a wire frame. I'll put a link in the description bar to where I got them from, but I quite often see that they go out of stock, so just keep an eye on the website if they are out of stock. They do come in 3 sizes, and I have purchased the medium and the larger size. These are the larger size, and it does say what size they are anyway, for your foot, what socks that you'll tend to be knitting. So I just pop them on there like that, and I'll just hang them up to dry, which is nice and easy. So if you haven't got any of these sock blockers, you can either make yourself like a cardboard frame so that they block out nice and neat, or you can block them straight onto the blocking mats. with some blocking pins, which I'll show you in a minute. For this hat, this is a beret, so I'm going to use a plate to block this, which is really nice and easy. I literally just pop the hat on a plate like so, and I'll just lean that up against the radiator so that it dries nicely. Perhaps titivate the ribbon just a little bit so that it's nice and neat. So this hat, obviously it's a beret, so I can block it on a plate, but if you were to just have a standard hat, you could block it on a balloon. So in order to block it on a balloon, what I'd do is I'd blow your balloon up, and then just make sure, before you tie it off, just make sure the circumference is about the same circumference as the head you want the hat to fit. Then tie it off, and then pop the hat over the balloon. I haven't blown the balloon up to the right size, you get the idea. So you can pop that in a glass so that it is all exposed to the air so it dries nice and quickly. And I'll just pop mine back on a plate so that it can dry nicely, and that'll dry nice and flat there, and it shows all the lovely detail off. So I like to use these blocking pins. They come in a coloured version or a white version, and they're really handy because you can place several pins in all at once. It's really handy and quick. I'll quickly show you how I block a sock with just using the blocking pins, and I also have some T-pins as well. These I actually picked up from Walmart when I was in the USA, but you can get them from Knit Pro as well, but they're basically just a T-shaped pin, which is handy to place. So I just gently tease the sock nice and flat, and then I put the blocking pin. I try and make sure that the two layers of fabric are on top of each other, and just pop the pins in, and I'd make sure that the pins are all the way around, like so, and work my way all the way around the sock. This is why the sock blockers are really handy, because you can just pop them on. But if you haven't got the right size sock blocker, actually this would be really handy too. And there is some smaller ones as well, so you can go in the smaller areas, like so. So that's how I block a sock if I didn't have any sock blockers. One other tip that I've also come across as well is if you don't like blocking the ribbed part of your sock, if you don't want that to be sort of blocked out and you want it to be nice and sort of zhuzhed in, what you could do is actually soak the rest of the sock, but don't soak the rib. And then when you actually come to put it on the sock blockers, or you put it on the blocking mat, when you take the pins out or you take it off the blockers, the actual ribbing won't be affected, because you need to wet your garment or sock for it to actually block properly. So that's a tip if you don't like to block out the actual ribbing section. So I'm now going to block out this baby cardigan. Now for any garment that you're actually going to block, I would make sure that you've got your measurements ready so that you can block it to the correct measurements. So I've got a blocking mat here because it's quite a small thing. I can do it on one mat. I can spread it out. So I'll just spread it out with my fingers to more or less how I want it to look. And then you could measure across the chest measurement to make sure that's correct, and at the bottom, and also the arm width, etc., so you're actually blocking it to the correct size. So I'll just pop in some blocking pins to make that nice and neat. I'm onto the second box of blocking pins now. I've actually got 3 boxes that I use for my personal use, and I find that that actually is enough for a couple of projects normally. I just make sure that I've got enough pins all the way around. And I would just double check any measurements that you've got. Oh, and I need to put some pins as well around the neckline to make sure that that's nice and neat. And I've just crossed the front of the garment as it would be when it was worn with the buttons done up. I'm going to sew my buttons on after I've blocked it because I think it'll make a neater job. So there we go, that's how I do my baby cardigan. Make sure that you've blocked your chest and your arms to the right measurement. With a baby cardigan you don't have to worry as much, but especially if it's a garment for an adult, just double check those measurements. And I just leave that somewhere nice and flat. So I'm now going to block this shawl. So it's quite a large shawl, so I've got all my blocking mats out on the table. They are actually running over the edge of the table, so I have to be careful of where I'm putting things. So this is a gorgeous large shawl. I'll pop the links to all the patterns that I'm showing you in the description bar down below. This is a Stephen West pattern. What I tend to do is get the centre of the shawl, top centre in the middle of the blocking mats here. I've got 3 blocking mats all the way across and 2 depth that way. And I'm going to try and sort of pull out the shawl into the arrangement that I think that it'll fit on my blocking mats. So some of them, if you're doing a very long one, you might have to put all of your blocking mats in a row, but you can sort of see how it's going to be pinned out now. And again, I'm using my blocking pins. I'm just starting from the centre top. I'm going to pin all the centre bits, and then I'm going to start pulling out so it stretches out all those lovely stitches so they look nice and neat. So I'm putting a little bit more pressure on this shawl to pull the stitches out. For lace as well, you want to pull the stitches out a little bit more. When you're doing garments, like I was doing before, you don't want to stretch it out too much, but for this case you do. If you're blocking something that's garter stitch, again, you perhaps wouldn't want to pull on those stitches as much as something like this. I'm going to use my T-pins to actually pin out the points of this shawl. If it's a straighter edge, I'd just use the blocking pins as well, but because these go out to a point, I'm going to use my T-pins because I only need to pull 1 point out. And I quite often find that I have to readjust the pins once I've blocked further around the shawl, so don't worry about doing that. You can see how that pattern is really starting to show up better now it's being blocked. So with shawls, I find that you can turn the top edges in slightly to get it to fit on the blocking mat, and it doesn't sort of affect the shape too much. You can see how this bit is over the edge of the table. So that's that side finished. I'm going to move around this side and finish that off. So there we are. I have finished pinning it out all the way around. So I tend to take a step back and just make sure that everything is pinned evenly so that both sides are pretty much the same. But you can see how much difference the blocking makes. Those stripes really show a lot better. So it's now the next day and my shawl and all the other things that I've blocked are actually nice and dry now. So I'm going to unpin these and show you what they look like when they're blocked. So now everything's blocked, I can show you what everything looks like. So I'm just taking the sock blockers off the socks and they look nice and neat like this. They're really nice now to gift. Of course you don't have to block socks every time that you wear them, but it's nice if you're going to gift them to make them look really nice and neat. So that's the socks. I have the little cardigan and you can see how much nicer that looks now it's been blocked. The rib no longer sort of turns inwards, which is really lovely, and it just looks much neater. We have the shawl, and shawls always look so much nicer. They've got such a better drape on them when they've been washed. These are all sort of merino yarns, so the merino is definitely improved with blocking in terms of drape. So there we go, that is my shawl. Next is my hat, and I'm going to take that off the plate, and that's what it looks like, nice and neat off the plate. This one was particularly sort of sticky outy round where the decreases were, around the top there, and I'll just show you quickly what it looks like. So that's much better now that it's been blocked. Really nice and neat and ready to wear. And last of all, I've got the jumper that I washed as well. So this doesn't look a lot different now it's been blocked, because it has been blocked before, but I just laid it nice and flat to dry, and that's dried overnight as well. I normally leave things sort of overnight in the summer, but then in the winter it might take 2 or 3 days to dry, especially a jumper like this. This is Aran weight. So there we are, that's all the things that I've been blocking. I hope that's helpful and useful to you. If you do anything differently, let me know, drop a comment down below on how you block things. And that's the end of the tutorial for today. So thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I shall see you in the next video. Bye!